Hi, I'm Joanna Martinez, and I'm an ally of LGBTQ entrepreneurs.
Hello, Out Bosses! Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on this week's episode, we are super lucky to have Joanna Martinez calling us to be on the show as one of our featured ally entrepreneurs. So, Joanna, welcome to the program. Really excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Rhodes.
Yeah. And so just to make sure that our audience has a better sense of who you are, Joanna, I'm going to kind of read a little bit of your super impressive bio. So Joanna is an award-winning business owner and the force behind the soon-to-be launched learning series Disruption University. Her book, A Guide to Positive Disruption, focuses on her experiences working through the ups and downs of the corporate world to make positive changes at the companies for which she has worked. Joanna is recognized as a global procurement supply chain leader and provides a range of services to management and employees. Her clients range from Fortune 50 companies to technology startups, and last year she was named number 9 on the list of the top 20 global procurement influencers by Thinkers 360. So Joanna, I'm again really excited to have you on the show. We've had a couple of folks in the past talk just a little bit about supplier diversity, the power of, being a diverse supplier like an LGBT certified business. And I'm wondering if you could remind our listeners again what this whole supplier diversity thing is about and kind of like your unique value add in the business that you're running right now.
So, suppliers should reflect your clients, right? The mix of folks and backgrounds and experiences and educations and things that you see in your client community, your customer community, should be reflected all the way through in your business and in your suppliers. And that's why I think supplier diversity is such an important thing. It is easy for a company to just go and use the big names, the companies that come to mind when they need some support in one way or another. And it's important for the diverse community to identify themselves with various registrations and things like that so that companies know where to go when they recognize that they've skewed very heavy and they have a supplier community that's only made up of large companies with a particular demographic, to look to try to require that kind of diversity. So I think it's really important.
Yeah, and I think for a number of folks who tune into this program, this is largely a listenership that is LGBTQ. We've got a lot of allies, most of whom are entrepreneurs, most of whom have a dimension of diversity where they could get certified as a diverse supplier. And one of the barriers to that is that I think, one, folks don't quite understand how to leverage that certification, or two, feel like it's a long shot. I'm not sure if I'm going to be a supplier for Sony in the work that I do, right? So what would you say to those listeners who are either skeptical about certification or just, like all of us running businesses, have a zillion things on the to-do list and this isn't in the top 10? What would you say to those folks?
So first of all, it is an individual decision, right? And depending on your corporate needs, the demands right now, it is a lot of work, and it is something that you do at the time that it makes sense. I think that selling oneself as just a diverse supplier, that will appeal to some companies, because some companies have goals like the $1 billion club, right? Some of the large corporations want to spend $1 billion with diverse suppliers. And having worked for some of those, I see how hard they search to find suppliers with the right capabilities who are in fact diverse. So you've got this population out there that's really working hard and trying hard to be inclusive. And if you can just look it up, right? And you see the companies that are active in diversity spend and, publicly stating that they have goals or publicly stating how well they're doing. So partially, if you have a goal of being a supplier to one of those companies, that then certification is an avenue to pursue. If you don't, then I would say that perhaps early on you focus on some other way to distinguish yourself via a service that you offer or the way you do it, or you've got something else that makes you stand out. If you don't have the wherewithal or the capability of spending the time to get certified right up front.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, in terms of, if it's in alignment with your goals for your business, you want to have contracts with large corporate folks as clients, that value proposition of being certified as an LGBT certified business, as a woman certified business. There's 16 different certifications that I'm familiar with. I'm sure there's more. So there's a lot of ways to differentiate yourself, and to also, for those corporations in particular that are part of the $1 billion club that you mentioned, Joanna, it's also helping them extend wealth to communities of businesses in wherever their headquarters are located, where they have a presence. And it's also helping them meet their broader diversity goals of making sure that their products and services are appealing to new markets, underserved markets, right? And so I think that you really lay that out really well. And speaking of value proposition, when it comes to your business, talk to us a little bit more about that transition that you had, having a really great career, working in corporate, and recognizing, hey, there's an opportunity for me as a business owner to break out and to help more clients do what it is that you can help them do. So kind of, what's your origin story, and how do you see yourself helping your ideal clients right now?
So my origin story, Rhodes, is that I went from a high school that was 90% female to engineering school, where at the time the men outnumbered the women 90-1. Just being me and showing up at class, I was causing disruption and just didn't realize it. I was just too naive to sort of realize that just by virtue of getting an A in calculus, I was causing sort of a ripple effect. And when I went into the workforce, I made a career in businesses that had a burning platform to change, right? The companies that hired me, and you know what, maybe it's because they were the only ones who would hire, a woman with an engineering degree at the time. But the companies that hired me were the ones that had a problem. I worked for a really wonderful, huge pharmaceutical company, but they were suffering in some of their businesses because of margin compression. They had lost some patents and things like that. I went to work in the spirits business, and at the time, there is a huge margin built into alcoholic beverages, but with all of the decreases in the amount of drinking people were doing, they were seeing their business beginning to decline after years and years and years of profitable growth. So I was always in a situation of, we have a problem. You have to help us fix this problem. That really, being kind of on the front line there, really helped me a lot. I never had the opportunity of working for a company that had such a huge margin and was so flush that they could send me to courses and do all kinds of great things. I always had to kind of be scrappy and figure out how to do things on my own. For example, I would often speak at professional events in exchange for tuition and expenses and things like that. So I did a lot of that kind of thing.
Yeah. It sounds like in your kind of corporate days, you're very entrepreneurial, right? And I totally resonate with that. I feel like that if I could describe myself as an employee before doing my own business, very much kind of in that spirit of, wow, there's a big thing that needs to be kind of changed in this organization. I have the skills to do it. Might not have a whole lot of budget to do it, but here's some ideas, right? And it sounds like that's kind of your background. How does that now translate in your business? Like, how does that help you stand out amongst your competition? And how do you think that you're having impact for the folks that you're serving right now?
So I'm effectively another set of eyes for companies, right? I step back and look to what's going on in the customer community, because everything that goes on in the company, whether it's how you organize yourself, it all has to flow through to the ultimate customer. Mm-hmm. So if you're a supplier to a bank, the bank is a supplier to other people. It's those end customers that you have to be sort of focused on. So because I have that ability to think that I learned in engineering school, because I have worked in a lot of different industries, I can effectively be another set of eyes and sort of look at that whole chain and see where there are links that aren't working. I also speak about disruption, and I teach people how to be positive disruptors. There is negative disruption, right? When bad things are happening to you and you don't want it. But then there are ways to make positive changes, at the places you work. And so I try to encourage people and give them ideas on how to do that.
Okay, so that helps me really understand. I mean, from my perspective, like there's a lot of strategy that goes into that. And for you, just that outside, the value of a consultant and expert, to kind of provide a new way of looking at work where people who are so close to it just can't see where those opportunities exist. And I think that's super valuable in what you're adding. You've mentioned disruption, right? And this was a part of the intro, the guide to positive disruption in which you wrote. Talk to us a little bit more about that book. What's it about, and how could it help those folks who are tuning in right now think about their own worlds and how they might be positively disrupting right now? But what do you mean by that, and who is the book written for?
So many years ago, working as an engineer, a machinist brought me over to his tool cart. And actually, I just moved. I had been an engineer, and I was moving to be the department manager of this department. And a gentleman who had been with the company for quite some time, he brought me over. He pulled out one of the drawers in his tool cart, and there was like a tombstone, made out of that yellow lined paper that everybody used to use. And the tombstone was cut out, everything, and it was taped on the bottom. And it had the names of all the managers that he had had over the years. And when they were managers, September of this year to April of the following year, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he was doing it to intimidate me, right? I mean, he was doing it to say, just don't mess with me because I'm going to outlast you. But I looked at the list and said, holy Hannah, there's a lot of names on this list. And just taking this new job, and I think I'm going to be here for years and years. And maybe this promotion and things are not going to last as long as I think they are. So it was sort of like my aha moment to start looking around and saying, there are a lot of forces and there are a lot of things changing and disrupting in some way. Now, I happened, when I was working as an employee, to work for large companies where there's a lot. You don't just have things going on the outside. You have things going on internally, mergers, acquisitions, a division being sold off, divisions being combined. So you sort of have that extra layer of disruption that you might not have in a smaller company. And you have to figure out how to work in that environment and how to make things happen and how to feel good at the end of a year where you can say, hey, I accomplished this. Because I had years that I accomplished nothing because I was so busy trying to keep my head down. So now, kind of relating to some of the folks who might be in your listening audience who might have a smaller company, right? Might be just starting a company. You've got disruption, and you've got all this disruption out there in your client base. I was working earlier this week with a small company that's based in New York City, and they have the financial services industry, who they long have relied upon as clients. Well, the margins are getting squeezed in financial services right now. So they don't have as much work there as they used to have. You have Amazon that didn't come, right? The New York bid for Amazon failed in the end, and they didn't come. So that was some level of disruption they were sort of counting on that didn't happen. On the other hand, you have lots of other tech companies moving into the city. They're going to have some needs that this company is going to be able to fill. So you have to sort of constantly be looking on the outside and saying, how do I adapt? You might have a product or a service or a way of consulting that services one industry real well. You have experience in that industry, you're comfortable with the lingo, you're all set to go. And then something happens where, jobs start moving, out of the country, for example. And you have to be adaptable enough, agile enough to be able to look for other ways and other people that can use your services. And the more you do that all along, the less you get hit with a surprise when you find out that your big client, no longer needs your services.
On the topic of disruption, I really like how you walked us through that, because I think that whether you're an employee in a very large corporation where mergers and acquisitions are happening, you've got new managers, there's new priorities. I mean, definitely, I've worked in large government agencies before. You get a new administration, a new director over an existing department, and you're doing something completely different, right? So that's something that is happening in larger organizations, and definitely for smaller organizations. Even if you're a solopreneur, with a technology change, for example, it could massively disrupt what you're doing. And, I have a lot of friends who are lawyers right now. I worry for them because I feel like so much of what they do, those kind of repeatable tasks that they can bill lots of hours for are now getting outsourced to artificial intelligence, right? So I guess like in when you were writing the book, knowing that, you've got your lens and kind of your expertise in procurement and supplier diversity. And I guess like either in that space or more broadly, what do you think might be on the horizon? If you identify as a futurist, I'm not sure if you do, but what might be some of those things that those of us who are business owners, what we should be aware of, like what's coming and where do you see like massive disruption and with that could be scary, where are the opportunities?
Right. So first of all, the Wall Street Journal actually just had an article a week or two ago about the legal community and how it's being disrupted and how the whole partnership scenario is really changing quite a bit. So you really are correct on that. Interestingly, although I spent a lot of time, I didn't spend all of my time buying on behalf of companies, but I spent a lot of time doing that. I also spent some time in a sales role in companies. And I find myself a lot now talking to people about their selling process and how that is changing and how they have to adapt. So it used to be that the first thing that happened when someone came in to sell you whatever it was, and you sat down and said, well, as from my analysis here, it looks like you've got 5 competitors or 10 competitors or hundreds, whatever that number is. Why should we do business with you? The typical answer was, because I have 25 years of experience, or the collective experience of the people in this room alone is 50 years or 100. I think the highest number I heard was 130 because I started keeping track after a while.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it doesn't matter anymore. I hate to say that, right? Because there have to be some places where that makes a difference. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, because of the changes in technology and in the way of doing business, sometimes that experience is actually seen as a negative and not a positive. So if you are a solopreneur or have a company and you are selling some software that you created before the cloud, it's server-based and not cloud-based, for example, there's an inherent bias in business now. I think that is the notion of born in the cloud. Mm-hmm. How old is this? Because the perception is if it is something that's old and been adapted, that there's going to be problems with it. Yeah. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is that the machines are coming, the robots are coming. I say that just to get people to listen. It's more like the artificial intelligence is coming, but that just doesn't flow off the tongue as smoothly.
Right.
Yeah.
The robots are coming. I mean, I feel like that could be your follow-up book.
Right.
On that sales piece, I think that's super valuable for our audience to hear. And I'm wondering if experience is now seen as potentially a negative because maybe that means a higher price tag to do business with a particular supplier. What are compelling points for, say, someone in procurement to say, you know what, out of these 50 people competing for this RFP, we're choosing this supplier because why? What are the things that sell now that could potentially help those of us who are now kind of freaking out by what you just shared?
Right. First of all, I mean, it's not that the experience is bad, but experience and nothing else. Experience with a lack of anything else, with a lack of a second sentence coming after that, that's where the problem is.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I tell people and companies that they need to find and identify their spark. I call it the spark. I probably should have come up with some crazy acronym, but what is the thing that the room lights up when you talk about it? The specific accomplishment or skill that lets you as an individual or you as your company stand apart from the crowd, right? What do you do differently that other people don't do? And let that uniqueness guide the conversation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you've done your homework and you understand what your client is looking for, there's going to be an alignment there. You're going to know to talk to their needs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's a simple step to do that kind of research ahead of time. And I would imagine, I mean, you've been in more of these kind of meetings than myself on the other side, but just like people missing that step and then they're not speaking the same language, and
Right.
and I think it's respect. Building trust with someone that you want to do business with is really getting in their shoes and understanding like what that problem is and painting a clear picture of what the world looks like when that's no longer a problem, right?
Right.
Hi, Outbosses. Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBTQ entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business, to know you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting practice. I'm dedicated to growing the belonging movement to empower leaders just like you, from the largest organizations to the smallest, to build healthier workplaces. That's why I'm thrilled to share everyday practices you can take to build more inclusive workplaces in my best-selling book, Belonging at Work. The book features some of today's leading diversity, equity, and inclusion thought leaders who share some of their wisdom, skills, and stories to give you the confidence necessary to stitch a sense of belonging into the fabric of your organization. To get your own copy of the book, visit rhodesonamazon.com. There you can find a paperback, Kindle, Audible, and hard copy version of the book. Again, that's rhodesonamazon.com. Together, let's grow the belonging movement. We had a guest on the show a while back, Vivian Ming, she is in the space, and she'll be the first to say, I'm one of the people that's displacing everyone with artificial intelligence. But what she really believes, and she's delivered a number of TED Talks now on the power of differentiation, right? On the power of, like what you said, I love that. I actually like, what is the spark? Identifying that spark that makes you, right? Because at the end of the day, we do business with people that we like, know, and trust. And I think that's a part of kind of the profile, the spark profile, I guess. So I guess, for our listeners who are largely LGBT, we talk on the show a lot about our LGBT superpowers and how that allows us to stand out in business. As an ally, what kind of guidance would you give, not only to LGBT folks, based on your own experience of being one of the only women in engineering program, if you can reflect on that, of just feeling different and how that can attract people who can see like, wow, you're really resilient. You were able to graduate top of your class where you had to work maybe 50 times harder than your male colleagues. We want to do business with you because we know that you're going to see this project through. I don't know. Like, do you have ideas or thoughts on what can inspire those of us who are LGBT to maybe lead with that, and that could actually help us succeed in our businesses?
So first of all, I have to say that I wasn't at the top of my class. And to this day, I wish my father had taught me how to like fix an engine. That would have like helped me so much. I was really scrambling there that first little bit of time.
You made it through. That's the important thing. Yeah.
To me, you've got to own your differences. The fact that you are different.
Yeah.
Like at some point in time, after so many comments that I was only there to find a husband, or things that professors or adjunct professors did or said that they'd get arrested for today. I mean, that was just the world that you were kind of sort of clawing your way through. And at some point in time, you just started to be you. I have 3 kids. I mean, they're adults now, but I worked the entire time that I was raising 3 children with a spouse who, by the way, I did find an engineering school, but that's a whole other story. With a spouse who traveled a lot. And I never acted like it wasn't okay to do what I needed to do. So if I needed to leave early or I needed to do something different because of my family needs, I just did it. And I just acted like that's how it was. Mm-hmm. I am what I am. This is me. I'm klutzy. I'm this, I'm that. But, here's a whole package. And I would just go and do my work. And I did good work. And in the end, most of the naysayers came around. I mean, I had someone who tormented me. He was a boss. He was from Ireland. He was on a 2-year assignment. And for 2 years, he tormented me. And at the end, as he was leaving, he looked at he was looking at the numbers for the year. And he realized that I was the only person who had delivered on the commitments for the year.
Wow.
And apologized then. And that was a bit of a victory. And that helped me kind of have my head up high after being beaten, bludgeoned for a couple of years verbally. Not being LGBTQ myself, I don't know if there is anything helpful in that or not, but I just share that somehow owning it, and I am what I am. I'm happy being what I am. Next discussion.
Absolutely.
Next data point.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely very, very helpful. And one piece, you were talking about doing what you had to do to take care of your family and do excellent work, for your employer. You're setting the expectations, you're setting professional boundaries, right? And unfortunately, you had that one particular boss who, after 2 years, actually looked at the numbers and had the awareness, I guess, to be generous, to say, wow, I really messed up. And you got the apology that I think for a lot of folks in the workplace, I think some of us are still waiting for that, so maybe that's the silver lining there, Yeah.
You know what? I'll tell you that I personally used to look for bosses who had daughters going into college.
Yep.
Or about to graduate from college. Because I found that back when I was a young woman in the workforce, they would change their attitudes when they saw the difficulties their daughters were experiencing.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can't always choose who you work for, but whenever I had a choice, I found some really good support coming from people who perhaps previously were just hideous in terms of how they viewed women would start to come around.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I saw that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great guidance because, for you as a woman, you were looking for men as allies, right? And I think that something that's transferable to our audience is whether you're running your own business and you want to do business with clients who are going to appreciate your unique differences, including being LGBT, or you're looking to work for someone who's going to be open and inclusive, right? Like, what better way to find someone who has talked about being an ally to LGBT people, or who may have someone in their life that they love who's LGBT? I just think that's really, really smart guidance, for us to, if we're unsure, we have incomplete information about the next client we take on or the next job we take, just trying to do some of that research if you can, in the age of the internet, that's sometimes helpful. To learn that kind of informal information about, your colleagues or your next boss or your next client. So I really, really appreciate that. And, in thinking about your own experiences, the positive experiences and the negative experiences working for someone else, as you're building out your own business right now, what are some things that you're thinking about, whether it's bringing on clients or if you're building out a team yourself, of how you're building a more inclusive organization that values differences?
Well, in my own case, I am trying really hard to listen for the spark, and to choose people, that I ally with based on what is setting them apart. And to make that the biggest criteria for selecting my cohorts. When you're in a small business, you wind up kind of forming alliances with different people because you maybe can't afford to hire very many, and so you look for kindred spirits, but people who also are distinguishing themselves in some way. So I would suggest that that's an important thing. The other thing I'd say is, look, I define positive disruption as a positive change, right? So you hear about Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, Amazon, you hear about big disruptors. And certainly, right, there are big positive disruptions that you could develop. But there's lots of smaller things as well. I always say to people, you don't have to invent the next iPhone here, right? One of the biggest positive disruptors that I ever worked with is a gentleman named Steve Margolis, who we didn't work for the same company, but our companies worked together. And Steve was larger than life. His style is very different from mine. I'm a little quieter. He's like big and gregarious. And I couldn't stand him until I realized that whenever people said they were going to do something, he was the only one that could be relied upon to do it 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And we were both working in an atmosphere where people said all the time they would do ABC. And how many times do you go to a meeting, right? And someone says, oh, I'll follow up on this or I'll do this. And they never do. And he always did.
Yeah.
And I saw him work such incredible change in the assignments that he had and in the things that they said they would accomplish, in the new products that went to market and things, all because his leadership of always doing what he said he would do started to trickle down and it started to spread out. And when people went to a meeting and Steve was the only one who had done it all, well, other people started to do their own things as well. And I saw this wonderful leadership coming from him that was just based on, well, I said I was going to do this and I did it.
Yeah. I mean, the follow through, regardless of the package that sometimes it comes in, is everything, in terms of keeping momentum moving forward. And I really like what you're saying about, finding alliances with people. If you're not, in the position to hire people, or you're kind of at capacity and you can't bring on more people onto your team, what are smart strategic alliances that you can form with those folks who actually follow through, people that you can count on, people that you like, know, and trust, or you can learn to appreciate and like their style, which may be super different than yours. And that's okay. Like, you don't want to, life would be really boring if you worked with everyone exactly like yourself. Or I know for myself, if I was working with someone like me, I would be probably like, that's too much, too much energy in one place.
I always tell people a room full of Joannas and we'd start eating our young.
Exactly.
So,
yes.
You do really have to, somewhere along the line, I took a course actually that talked about how the best teams were teams that were, mixes of styles and backgrounds and things.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, I see that. Sometimes I'll teach classes and I noticed that once. I had two groups within the class, and one group was really getting it. They were on top of things. They were coming up with ideas. They were really energized. And the other one was just plugging along. And I started, as I kind of listened to them back and forth, I realized that group two was made up of people who worked in the same industry, had known each other for years, almost could finish each other's sentences. Mm-hmm. And so that energy and those ideas weren't coming forth because they all, quote unquote, knew it all. The other group was made up of people from a real diverse group of companies and a real diversity in terms of their levels of experience. And they were really on top of it. And I found myself, one of the pieces of advice I give people is make a friend in a different industry, in a different part of the country, right? This is a gross generalization, but you have in the Midwest and on the East Coast many companies that are very old and that they're large, they have established ways of doing things. And then you've got, on the other coast, you've got people who are, much more technology, many more entrepreneurial firms. They have different problems to solve. Their companies aren't old enough to have your problems, but you've gone full cycle and you could be helped by some of the things that they're struggling with.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a real quid pro quo, but I've right now I show a map of the United States, one of my slides with some circles. I'm trying to get at the nerve to show two hands shaking across the country.
Nice. I really appreciate that. And absolutely for teams or strategic alliances, when you've got different people in the room, it challenges you to explain, what your business is for, who it's for, why does it matter? And if you're outside of a group that's not exactly like you or thinks exactly like you, some of the assumptions that you make about what those answers are could be challenged, and it could actually shine a light on a new opportunity or help you kind of resolve something that's unclear in how you talk about what you do. So I really appreciate that story, Joanna. I think that's helpful for us to kind of think about our businesses in that way.
Yeah, and Rose, if you don't mind, there's one other recent conversation that I think bears to mind here. I was speaking to someone who is an executive at a linen supply business. He said to me, how do I distinguish myself? It's all about white. Hotels want white. They want a certain thread count. They want a certain delivery. We all, myself and my competitors, all offer great service. We'll all hop in the car in a moment and, fix any problem or whatever. What can I do? And so he and we brainstormed a little bit and, can you offer things a different way, a different technology, a different style, a try before you buy with some new types of products? I didn't know. But when he said no to everything else, I said, well, if you're the same as your competitors in every single way, then the only variable left is price. Then all you can do is either market yourself as premium price and hope nobody asks you how you are a differentiator, or you have to come in at a lower price to get somebody to, if people aren't convinced that you've got some other differentiation.
That's super helpful to think about that. And I think it's like those kind of edges, and I've shared on this program, I'm going through this program right now called the Alt MBA program with Seth Godin, which is awesome. And he often talks about those edges, whether it's kind of price or who it's for, but really thinking creatively, like if you're a marketer, right? Like in a really crowded industry, like how do you separate yourself, or you're in the linen business? And so, yeah, I think price is one of those pieces, but how you talk about price, like we're premium, or, we're able to be accessible to more people, whatever it is, I think that's really valuable to think about. So Joanna, we're rounding out, we're coming towards the end of the hour, and I wanted to remind our listeners that we have a listener experience survey that's out right now. And for me, the show has been around for about 4 years now. So I think it's time to get a better sense of what you all like, what you would like to see different. And one of the questions that I ask in the survey is, what kind of questions do folks want me to ask of our guests? So Joanna, there's a couple here, and I would love it to be like a choose your own adventure. So maybe the question that's making your heart ring or excites you will be the one that you answer. It's totally your choice. But one is, what keeps you awake at night when it comes to your business? What business achievement are you most proud of? And this other one is an interesting one, which is what can the average person do to bring balance between the general public and the LGBT community? So not sure if any of those ring for you, but is there one that you feel comfortable answering?
Well, what keeps me awake at night is differentiating myself. And there are lots of people who use the word change, use the word disruption. And I try constantly to be assessing what the community is looking for. What are the kinds of questions I get asked? When I start to see patterns, I try to, develop things that go to that, because it's indicative, I think, of the kinds of things that my clients are looking for and the kinds of questions that they've got.
Yeah.
So that constant look. And I think what I would caution everyone is something that I said earlier on. You really have to go not just to the people who are your overt clients, your direct clients, but who are their clients, and try to understand what's going on in their business world. What kind of disruption are they seeing? And how can you start to adapt yourself, or just get the knowledge? Just read the articles. You mentioned just now taking a course. Perhaps it's a matter of hiring someone or finding an alliance with someone with the right kind of expertise, so that as that change comes barreling through, you're not caught by surprise.
Yeah. I think that there's a through line in our conversation, and it's around that differentiation. It's that value proposition and getting real clarity beyond, I've been in the industry for however many years, and, these are all the people that I know. It's like, get clear about your why, that spark factor, like what you were talking about, and, take that risk of being a little vulnerable and being human, when you show up in meetings and to talk about why you do what you do. I think that's really, really valuable, Joanna. And it's good that you're in this with us, trying to stay awake at night of like, what really is differentiating me from the rest of the group, and the fact that you have that self-awareness that it's not a static, right? It's more of an ongoing process. I think that's what will continue to allow you to stand out from other folks in your space. So again, for folks, if you're interested in having your questions read on air, you can text OutBoss to this number that is very relevant in this conversation, which is 33777. So again, that's OutBoss, all one word, to 33777. And Joanna, that number is really important to you as well. Can you share with the audience as to why?
Yes, thanks. If you text the word disrupt to 33777, I'll send you a free chapter from my book and some updates about the online learning that we're putting together for the spring.
Yes. All right. So that is Disrupt to the same number, 33777. Such a generous gift. So thank you, Joanna, for that. And OutBoss to the same number, and you get the listener experience survey, as well as the show notes from today, where you can learn more about Joanna's work. You can learn more about her book. And you can definitely get connected to that free chapter. So Joanna, this has been such a pleasure. In addition for texting Disrupt to 33777, where's the best place online where people can find out more about what you're doing to help your clients?
Reach out for me on LinkedIn.
Great.
So Joanna Martinez, I understand that there's a candidate on The Voice right now with my name. So put in Joanna Martinez Disruption or Joanna Martinez Procurement and you'll get me.
Awesome. So you're not going to sing us a song right now?
I will not.
Okay. All right.
Not.
Okay. I totally understand that. All right. Well, thank you, Joanna, for being on the show. This was awesome. For Outbosses, thank you so much for tuning in. One of the pieces of feedback we got in our listener survey was, when does the show come out? The show comes out every single Tuesday, every week. It's been coming out for the past 4 years, Tuesday morning, and you get a nice hour to learn from amazing, amazing business leaders like Joanna. So tune in on Tuesdays. And my parting words, as always, is keeping your authentic selves 100% of the time.